Thank you all. What a welcome.
Hello, Athens. Yeah. I think that's their thing. I like it.
That is definitely their thing. So I've been to 2 SEC schools with Turning Point USA, and my Ohio State brethren are ashamed of me because I've given you guys way more love than my own alma mater, but it's pretty good to be in SEC country, I have to say. It's great to be here.
We can help fix that. We can work on that. So for those of you wondering why I don't have really flowing, long, blonde hair right now, so I'm going to address it right at the front. Mr. Vice President, I'm on stage here instead of our friend Erica Kirk.
That's right.
Because unfortunately, she has received some very serious threats in her direction, which is terrible. It's a terrible reflection on the state of reality and the state of the country. But it underscores a larger point that she has received a lot of attacks from surprising places, perhaps. Tell us what you think about that. Some of the people that have made, part-time jobs out of attacking Erica, and this is the net result.
Sure. Well, first of all, I love Erica, and I know that she did get some threats. And, about 2 hours ago, as you know, Andrew, I was a little worried that we were going to have to cancel the event because Erica was not going to come, and she was very worried about it. And I talked to the Secret Service, and obviously these guys do a very good job. And I said, you know what? Let's let Erica do what she needs to do for herself and her family. I'm sure Andrew will fill in. And let's go and make this an amazing event with the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens, Georgia. So absolutely, we're going to do this thing. But look, I mean, in so many ways, when did Charlie die? It was mid-September, I believe.
September 10th.
And in the past, that's right, it was the day right before September 11th. And in so many ways, the past 6 or so months have been 2 separate living hells for Erica Kirk. And the first is, of course, that she lost her husband, she lost the father of her children, and I'll never forget this because I mean, frankly, I think a lot about it because my wife is now pregnant with our 4th baby, is when we went and picked up, thank you, but when we went and picked up Charlie's body in Utah, and of course you were there with us, and I met Erica, and I met the family, I met Charlie's his parents and his little sister. And I just think about that moment and where she was so broken. And any of you know who anybody who's grieved before is you kind of go from just crestfallen and sad, and then you want to remember the person that you just lost, and there's just this constant flood of emotions, right? At one moment you're laughing about something they said 2 years ago, and at another moment you're sobbing because they're not there anymore. And I thought about that moment a lot because Erica told me, and that was the first time she'd ever, told me this. And I guess I thought about it a lot in the context of our own, my wife's pregnancy. She said, I really wish that we had had more babies together. And that kind of hit me like, it's just it, he's gone. That was sort of one of the moments where I realized Charlie's not coming back here. And you have this mom who's really sad about the fact that her 2 little kids may never have memories. I mean, you think about as a father, I know most of you out there are too young to have kids, but one of the things that you think about as a father is, I want my kids to remember this moment, right? I want my 6-year-old to remember when I took him to the zoo, or my 6-year-old son was just baptized on Easter Sunday, and I want him to remember that moment with me, and thank you. But so Erica's struggling with this, and of course that's terrible, unspeakable. Most of us cannot even put ourselves in her shoes, while at the same time, she's trying to make sure that Charlie's legacy doesn't die. And in that context, everybody is attacking her over everything, and they're lying about her, and it's one of the most disgraceful things that I've ever seen in public life. And I've seen a lot of crazy stuff in my life as a political leader, and I will tell you that the people who tell you, I was there with her, I was holding her hand, my wife was hugging her while we loaded Charlie's body onto Air Force 2 and said the Lord's Prayer, the people telling you that Erica wasn't grieving her husband are full of shit. And we need to be honest about that fact. Excuse my language. My wife says I got to work on my language. She's been telling me that for 12 years, and it still hasn't taken. But the thing is, look, when you become a public figure, the natural thing, and I've talked to Erica about this privately, is a ton of crazy people say a ton of things about you that simply aren't true. But the thing that makes it so egregious with Erica is that she's a grieving person who's trying to carry on her husband's legacy. And look, we all do things that are wrong. If you want to, criticize Turning Point USA for not taking this position or having this political disagreement, or maybe it should do this or that, that's all above board. But to say that Erica Kirk wasn't grieving her husband on that day, to say that Erica Kirk was somehow complicit in it, is so preposterous and so disgusting. And it's one of the things that has broken, I think, the American public conversation over the last 6 months. Andrew, we could talk about this for a long time. Charlie's absence, I felt it so many times in so many different ways. There have been so many times where I wanted to call Charlie and say, man, you've got to call this person, or man, you've got to put this event together so we can help this candidate, or just to bounce ideas off of as a friend. There have been so many ways in which I felt that void. But one of the ways in which I felt that void is that it's like the response to Charlie Kirk dying, the response to Charlie Kirk getting assassinated by a left-wing furry lover, is the response should have been, let's go after left-wing violence and terrorism. Let's defund the networks of left-wing violence and terrorism. That's what we've been doing in Washington, D.C., and that's what we've been fighting for every single day. Savannah Hernandez, of course, was assaulted in Minnesota a couple days ago. I talked to Kash Patel on the way down here, and I said, I assume that we're doing something here. And he said, yes, we've had multiple agents on the ground. We've already talked to Savannah. We're going to use the video to try to go after the people who assaulted her and then try to defund the networks that fund those radicals who are going around assaulting activists. That's what we should be doing. And I know that politics is hard, and I know that it's challenging, and I know that things aren't always easy, and we're going to have disagreements even within our coalition. But if you're going after Erica Kirk and not the people who are trying to destroy the United States of America, you're part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Yeah, amen. I think that's really well said, Mr. Vice President, and I always try and remember that Erica has to live with this constant reality that her kids are one parent away from being orphans. And so we take that extremely seriously. And as you mentioned, what happened with Savannah, and I think it's just important that we remember that we're dealing with humans. These are human beings.
Exactly. And I've heard some people say, well, Erica was smiling 2 days after Charlie Kirk died or something like that. And it's like, most of us in this room have grieved somebody that we loved. Maybe, hopefully not a spouse who dies in the prime of their life, but when you deal with somebody who's grieving, it's always this weird combination of emotions. It's intense sadness, intense affection. It's, you sort of love that person in that moment, maybe more than you ever have because you feel their absence. You think about all the happy moments that you had and you can't help but smile, and then you remember they're not there and you can't help but sob. That's what grief is like. And so, again, if your instinct is to go after not the left-wing radicals who are assaulting Savannah, or not the people who shot Charlie Kirk, but if your instinct is to go after a young mother because she's grieving in a way that you find you find wrong, well, why don't you stay in your lane and mind your own business?
Yeah, amen.
Grief is complicated, so there's another angle of this, Andrew, which is just so absurd, which is that people will say that Erica, she's been doing this or she's been doing that, and I would be doing something different. And it's like, first of all, that's fine. Like, if you want to criticize somebody because you have a disagree with my politics, disagree with something that Erica or Andrew say on the Turning Point podcast, but this desire to go after her for the way she's grieving her husband, that's the most preposterous thing I've seen in a very long time, and I've seen a lot of crazy stuff in politics.
Amen. Thank you for saying that, Mr. Vice President. So I think this segues very well into our next question here. You are a practicing Catholic. You're, despite your language, you're attempting to be a faithful Catholic.
That's right. That's right.
I think it was well placed, if I,
Thank you.
if I may say.
it.
I'm sure you've seen that the Vatican and the Pope and the President have been in the news
yes.
lately. So as a Catholic, what does it feel like to be, in the middle of that?
I thought it was going to be an easy question. This is kind of a tough question here.
Nope, no easy ones there.
So here's the thing about this. So first of all, you will sometimes hear people say, well, the Vatican, the church, whether it's the Protestant church, the Catholic church, they should preach the gospel, they should ignore public policy. I actually don't agree with that. I actually think that it's a good thing when Christian leaders, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, part of preaching the gospel is talking about how the gospel applies to the issues of the day. So I've never been one of these people who say that you should never have, Christian leadership not talking about politics, or frankly, political leaders not talking about their Christian faith. But I do think that we have to remember that, each of us has our own role. I'm the Vice President of the United States. The fundamental way I understand my role is that I'm trying to take the lessons, the moral truths that are rooted in Christianity, and I'm trying to apply them to a whole host of complicated real-world scenarios. Thank you.